To accurately diagnose and treat pediatric respiratory patients, we have to look past the list of independent symptoms. The respiratory tract is a continuous, predictable engineering system. Every clinical sign, every wheeze, cough, and gasp is a direct consequence of disrupting normal pressure and flow at a highly specific coordinate in that system. The baseline mechanics are dictated by Boyle's law. During normal inspiration, the diaphragm contracts and flattens, increasing thoracic volume. This forces intrathoracic pressure to drop below atmospheric pressure, pulling air in. That negative intraluminal pressure also impacts the airway walls. Above the chest, the atmospheric pressure outside the neck is higher than the pressure inside the lumen during inspiration. This gradient naturally tends to drag the upper airway walls inward. Below the thoracic inlet, the expanding lung provides radial traction that pulls the intrathoracic bronchioles open. During expiration, that traction is lost and intraluminal pressure falls relative to pleural pressure, causing these lower airways to compress. These two physics principles explain the sound of the disease. An obstruction in the extrathoracic airway is narrowed further by the inward pull of inspiration, producing inspiratory stridor. Narrowing in the intrathoracic small airways is worsened by the compressive force of expiration, producing expiratory wheezing. Airway resistance is inversely proportional to the fourth power of the radius. Because an adult has a 4 mm subglottic radius and a child has a 2 mm radius, the child's baseline resistance is 16 times higher before any disease even begins. Adding exactly 1 mm of inflammatory edema to both demonstrates the child's vulnerability. The adult's resistance increases threefold, but the child's radius drops from 2 mm to 1, and their resistance increases 16-fold. This system is protected by the mucociliary escalator, where ciliated cells clear trapped pathogens. This defense fails through viral cytopathic effect, which kills these cells, and through inflammation, which forces goblet cells to overproduce mucus that the remaining cilia cannot clear. At the base of the system, the alveoli rely on type II pneumocytes to produce surfactant. By Laplace's law, the surface tension of a sphere this small creates massive collapsing pressure. Without surfactant, the alveoli lack the necessary outward pressure to stay open during exhalation. The child's airway operates with a minimal margin for error. High baseline resistance and low respiratory reserve make even minor inflammation a significant mechanical threat. The subglottic space is the narrowest point of the pediatric airway. It is surrounded by the cricoid cartilage, the only complete cartilaginous ring in the respiratory tract. Parainfluenza type 1 has a specific tropism for this location. Its surface proteins target the dense cluster of sialic acid receptors lining the laryngeal epithelium. Viral replication triggers an inflammatory cascade, increasing capillary permeability and leaking plasma into the submucosa. Because the rigid cricoid ring prevents the tissue from expanding outward, the swelling is forced inward, narrowing the lumen. Forcing high-velocity air through this tight, fixed geometry creates extreme turbulence. This air causes the swollen vocal cords to vibrate abnormally, resulting in the characteristic low-pitched barking cough. On an AP X-ray, this bilateral inward swelling casts a tapered shadow known as the steeple sign. It provides a literal radiographic silhouette of the subglottic edema. Dexamethasone addresses this by entering the cell nucleus to repress transcription of pro-inflammatory cytokines, halting the cascade driving the capillaries leak. For immediate relief, nebulized racemic epinephrine acts on alpha-1 receptors to cause local vasoconstriction, reducing capillary pressure to rapidly shrink the inflamed tissue. Managing croup requires addressing the fluid-space conflict bounded by the cricoid ring. By reducing vascular permeability and constriction, we can maintain the airway while the virus runs its course. Above the glottis, the epiglottis is a highly vascular structure covered in lax, flexible connective tissue. Haemophilus influenzae type B, or Hib, uses a polysaccharide capsule to repel phagocytosis, allowing it to invade the bloodstream. Once systemic, its lipo-oligosaccharide wall triggers a widespread cytokine storm. Through this bacteremia, the pathogen seeds the epiglottis from the inside, exiting the rich capillary beds to colonize the lax mucosal tissue. the epiglottis becomes a heavy, inflamed mass. Swallowing becomes too painful to attempt, leading to drooling. To mechanically pull this mass away from the laryngeal inlet, the child instinctively adopts a tripod posture, leaning forward to keep the airway open. Examining the throat is dangerous here. The inflamed supraglottic mucosa is hyperreactive. Touching it can trigger a vagal reflex, a laryngospasm, that snaps the vocal cords shut. Treatment requires third-generation cephalosporins. These possess a modified side chain that resists the pathogen's beta-lactamase enzyme, allowing the drug to bind penicillin-binding proteins and destroy the bacterial cell wall. Epiglottitis is a systemic bacteremia that can lead to sudden, complete airway obstruction. Mechanical securement of the airway is the absolute priority, preceding any pharmacological intervention. In the intrathoracic bronchioles, respiratory syncytial virus targets infants as maternal IgG antibodies wane between 3 and 6 months of age. RSV uses its F protein to fuse the membrane of an infected cell directly to a neighboring healthy cell. This creates syncytia, massive multinucleated structures that allow the virus to spread while bypassing the extracellular space. Dying cells form viscous plugs. During inspiration, expanding lungs provide radial traction, pulling the bronchiole open to let air enter. On expiration, traction is lost. The bronchiole collapses around the plug, permanently trapping the air. Successive breaths cause massive alveolar hyperinflation. Albuterol and corticosteroids are often ineffective here. Albuterol relaxes smooth muscle, and steroids address cytokine-driven edema, but neither can dissolve a physical plug of necrotic debris. Because the primary obstruction is structural, treatment is largely supportive. Effective pharmacological intervention is limited to palivizumab, a monoclonal antibody that blocks the F protein to prevent the fusion process from starting. In the alveoli, resident macrophages normally clear trace amounts of aspirated bacteria, but a large inoculum or a recent viral infection can overwhelm these defenses. Macrophages release IL-8 to recruit neutrophils, which dump reactive oxygen species and elastase into the space. The resulting exudate of dead cells, fibrin, and red blood cells physically displaces the air. The body senses this lost gas exchange surface through chemoreceptors, which force an increase in respiratory rate. Because infants have high metabolic demands, consuming up to 50 milliliters of oxygen per kilogram per minute, tachypnea is the most sensitive early sign of this alveolar failure. Neonates are particularly vulnerable. Their naive T cells and lack of immunological memory allow maternal colonizers like Group B Streptococcus and E. coli to seed the lungs rapidly. Streptococcus pneumoniae causes lobar consolidation through a specific mechanism. The thin edema fluid it provokes flows through the pores of cone, microscopic channels between alveoli. This radial spread continues until it hits the structural barrier of a pleural fissure. Penicillin G stops this by binding to penicillin-binding proteins on the bacterial membrane. This disables the enzymes required to cross-link the peptidoglycan wall, causing the cell to lyse as it attempts to divide. Typical bacterial pneumonia transforms gas exchange spheres into solid, consolidated zones, requiring an increased respiratory rate to maintain oxygenation. Pathogens like Staphylococcus aureus bypass simple inflammation. Its PVL and alpha toxins punch holes in host cell membranes, destroying neutrophils and lung parenchyma. This tissue necrosis creates a cavity. When that cavity connects to a damaged bronchiole, it forms a ball valve trap. Successive breaths pump air into the void, inflating it into a thin-walled cyst known as a pneumatoceal. Mycoplasma pneumonia represents a different challenge. It is a wall-less organism with a triple-layered cell membrane. Mycoplasma anchors directly to the respiratory epithelium. Because it does not fill the alveoli with fluid, the X-ray can show severe bilateral perihilar streaks, while the child's oxygen saturation remains relatively stable. Because mycoplasma lacks a cell wall, we cannot use beta-lactam antibiotics. We must use macrolides, like azithromycin, which target the 50S ribosomal subunit to shut down the pathogen's protein synthesis. When a pathogen relies on acute tissue destruction or lacks standard biological targets, the disease bypasses the typical patterns of alveolar consolidation. The pediatric airway is a predictable biomechanical machine. When we understand the physics of the tube and the molecular tools of the pathogens, the clinical features become logical consequences. This derivation matrix builds the clinical picture. Anatomical location and specific organism establish the groundwork. These variables dictate the altered physiology, like airway collapse or alveolar filling, which then predicts the X-ray imaging and oxygenation limits. Finally, mapping the cellular lesion mechanism determines the exact treatment. Mastering the biophysics of the airway and the molecular biology of the pathogens allows us to derive the solution to any pediatric respiratory crisis.